Hey guys, Jeremy Knauff here, and today we're going to break down a situation that you've probably seen in the news with the Minnesota daycare fraud scheme. We're going to approach this from the perspective of how I would handle the massive Minnesota daycare fraud PR crisis. Now, this is not a crisis for the people responsible for it necessarily. They're all going to end up in a lot of trouble, but their reputations are pretty much ruined at this point. This is more of a crisis for the politicians in charge, any of the elected officials, any of the government employees responsible for oversight, anything in that side of things. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how I would handle a situation like that if I were handling them as a client. Give you guys a little bit of background on the story first, if you're not familiar with it. In a nutshell, this is a fraudulent Somali daycare ring where they've been setting up these fake companies to run daycares, collecting tons of money from government grants, government programs, and basically not actually running a daycare. So far, the FBI has uncovered $250 million in fraudulent payments that have been made to these organizations, but they're estimating something in the range of about $9 billion. Now, the daycares in question, frankly, are ridiculous. These are, a bunch of rundown buildings. There's no kids there. This was actually the sign out in front of one of the daycares, Quality Learning Center. There's probably a lot of real high quality learning going on here. I think that really there's a good opportunity to make a movie here. I think Jerry Bruckheimer would be the perfect person to run with something like this. Daycare Down would be my suggestion. I think that could be a lot of fun. And from what I hear, the investigators, the inspectors who oversee these daycare centers have been checking out some of the daycare centers already. I did get a little clip of some of the video of these people who were going out to check out the Somali daycare centers. Let's go ahead and roll that clip real quick here. Man, that is an intense job, huh? I do not think I would want to be doing that. But on a more serious note, what we're going to talk about now is how I would handle a situation like this if somebody had come to me with a PR crisis in this kind of situation. So there's two different responses to a PR crisis in most cases. There's the just comms approach, where you're basically just putting a message out there. You're just telling your side of the story. And that's something that's more appropriate when there's just a misunderstanding. And then you've got the comms plus action. And this is for when something needs to be done to right a wrong. So if you've done something wrong and you need to not only address the situation, but also take action to fix it and prevent it from happening in the future. A good example of that was Tylenol's PR crisis back in I think it was in the 80s, where somebody had been going in, it was a serial killer, had been going in, opening up bottles of Tylenol in the stores and putting in poison into the bottles of Tylenol. Now, that's why every bottle that you have nowadays, you open it up. But first of all, it's got that little plastic seal around the lid itself. But then once you open it, it's also got that tamper-resistant foil that's glued down to the top of the bottle. That all was the action part of Tylenol's PR crisis, right? They came out, they got ahead of the situation. They actually handled it really well. They recalled literally every bottle of Tylenol that was on the shelves. And then they implemented this tamper-proof packaging. So that's an example of comms plus an action. Now, to put this in context, I've done a lot of crisis comms. I've done a lot of, reputation management, things like that. I would only take on a client like this if they agreed to take accountability and if I believed that they would actually follow through. Now, they won't, so I wouldn't in a case like this, right? These are politicians we're talking about, not exactly somebody who's known for their honesty and their integrity and their their propensity to do the right thing. So I would never take this on as a client, but we will talk about how I would address it if I did, and if they actually did the things or would do the things that I felt they needed to do to fix the situation. So the first thing that I would do in the situation is a full court press tour: print, digital, television, podcasts, social media, everything. And not just friendly media outlets. That's a big mistake that I see a lot of people make. They'll go out to the outlets that they know are going to cover them favorably. They're not going to go anywhere where anyone's going to push back, where anyone's going to throw them any hard questions, right? They're never going to be put on the spot. When you go out only to the outlets that are already favorable to you, the ones that are going to tell only a positive story, it doesn't help your credibility. In fact, it actually hurts your credibility. But when you're willing to go out into the lion's den, so to speak, go on to the media outlets that are going to be more adversarial and sit down and actually have an interview, then that really does wonders for your reputation, provided that you follow through and also take the action to do what you need to do. It's also worth noting that in these interviews, you can't just sit there and give bullshit answers. You have to really be transparent. You have to be honest. You have to really talk about what happened, who's responsible. You have to take accountability. And then after that, you still have to take action, right? The other thing we have to do is, if you're going to be posting about this on social media, which I did say that that's a big part of this, you can't go and turn off comments. So a good example of this is Hillary Clinton constantly has all of her posts on X set to where only the people that she follows can comment, right? That does not exactly scream, I really stand behind what I'm saying. If you cannot take any criticism, if you're not willing to have anybody come and push back on what you're saying, that is a huge way to kill your credibility. There's some other organizations that do that as well. Most of these gun control organizations do the same thing. They've either got the comments completely shut off, or they will have it set to where only people who follow, or the people who they follow, can comment. You can't do that in a situation like this. I mean, you can't do it in general. It really makes you look shady. It makes you look like your positions cannot withstand any criticism. So that is multiplied exponentially in a PR crisis. So we cannot do that. Now, in the press tour, I would address first what happened. Now, in this case, a lot of people in the Somali community started these fraudulent companies that were set up as daycares, and then they applied for millions in government funding. To top it off, they then turned around and made campaign contributions from that money to a lot of the Democrat politicians. And this has resulted in billions of dollars of fraud. Now, this is a huge problem when our economy is already a mess. I mean, it's a huge problem all the time, but to do this in a time when the economy is already a mess, everybody's already talking about how everything is unaffordable, inflation is eating away at the value of the dollar, they can't buy groceries, they can't pay rent, they can't find a house that they can afford to buy. Man, this is just really, really bad optics on top of being ethically terrible. So that's what you have to address as far as what happened. Then you have to address who's responsible. Now, let's be honest. Everybody who was involved in this they've either completely dropped the ball and they were incompetent and inept, or they were complicit. There's zero gray area here. So all of these people have to be named. They have to take accountability. And that's the next thing that we have to address is, how are you taking accountability? And like I said, people have to go to jail over this. This is a massive financial fraud. So it's not this thing, oh, hey, we're sorry, we won't do that again. That is not going to fly. So the people responsible have to be held accountable by prosecuting them and sending them to jail. They also have to be permanently barred from ever receiving business loans, grants, or any kind of government funding. And probably, if I was running this, I would say they probably also have to be barred from ever running a nonprofit, a business, or an NGO. And all of this needs to be transparent and excuse me, All of this needs to be transparent and bipartisan. You can't just say, hey, we've looked into it, we're going to go ahead and reprimand these people, and that's the end of it. No, that's not going to fly. It has to be public, and you have to have leaders from both sides having a hand in how this plays out. The last thing that you have to address is how you will prevent this in the future. Rightfully, voters are pissed. This is an obscene abuse of our taxpayer dollars. And frankly, it's even more of a problem because these are people who came over here from another country and they're stealing from American citizens. So that makes the problem exponentially worse. As a result of that, trust is completely lost. So people need to go to jail over this, and that obviously will help to prevent other people from doing this kind of thing in the future if they know that there's going to be serious consequences for their actions. And then throughout this process, and then in everything going forward, massive oversight is required. And what I would suggest in a case like this is to align with DOGE. Now, that was the organization that Elon Musk created to basically go through and root out waste, fraud, and abuse within the federal government. And also a lot of state governments implemented similar programs. Our governor here in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis, implemented a state level DOGE, and they have found a lot of areas of waste, fraud, and abuse that they're cutting out. So aligning with DOGE would actually be a great step, not just because it's going to identify this and prevent this in the future, but also because it's bringing in that bipartisan angle, right? They're not going to just the friendly people, the people who are going to help them, the people who are going to kind of help sweep it under the rug. They're going to the people who really want to cut this out the most. And in doing that, you're showing a real commitment, not only to transparency, but also to preventing this in the future. And that's a huge way to slowly start gaining trust back. And it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's a thing that's going to take months, if not years, to accomplish. Because once you damage trust, it takes time to build it back. Because there's always going to be that nagging fear in the back of everyone's brain. Well, okay, they got caught. They maybe fixed it. We don't really know for sure, but maybe they'll do it again. Maybe they'll find a different way to do it. Maybe they'll hide it better. Maybe they'll work with other people to help cover it up. Which, by the way, did actually happen. So this whole thing didn't just break over the holidays. This is a thing that has been investigated and prosecuted as far back as, I think, 2019. And they actually went to trial in one of the cases. And the jury found the people guilty. What do you think happened? The judge overruled the jury and let them walk. So that's the kind of thing people expect from the government. They expect them to empower and embolden the criminals, this kind of behavior. So rebuilding trust is going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of effort, and it's going to take massive transparency. We all know that they're not going to do any of this. What they're going to do is they're going to circle the wagons. They're all going to go into their little defensive position. They're going to ignore the situation, and they're going to flood social media and traditional media with opposing views. They're going to try to drown out the noise, and they're going to do that in a combination of ways. They're going to try to make it seem like this isn't a big deal. They're going to make it seem like it's much smaller than it actually is. They're also going to try to attack their opponents and flood social media and traditional media with all kinds of other stories to try and distract people. And then the other thing that they will do is they will try to discredit their critics, the people who are sharing the story, the people who are prosecuting the situation, the people who are holding the investigations and the hearings. And we're already starting to see some of that manifest. We're already starting to see them using these tactics to try and make this story go away. So it's not going to end well for them if they continue down that path. Like I said, this is how I would have handled a situation like this if they were a client of mine. And when I say they, I mean the politicians and the elected officials behind all of this, the ones who kind of helped to create and enable this. As far as the people who actually did the stuff, there's no fixing them. That's just a straight criminal trial. They're going to get prosecuted. Hopefully they're going to go to jail. There is no PR that can help them with that. But if I was to help the politicians, this is how I would have done it. But like I said, they're not going to do the things that need to be done. So I would never take them on as a client anyway. But anyway, hope you guys found that valuable. If you do find yourself in a PR crisis, everything that I talked about in this video here today is the exact blueprint that you need to follow in your PR crisis. You have to get out there in front of it. You have to explain what happened, how it happened. You have to take accountability, and you have to then outline how you're going to prevent it from happening in the future. So if you guys found this valuable, love it if you drop a comment, share this with someone who you think might find value in it, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks, everyone.